Today I'd like to talk about the CIP Importer. The CIP Importer is an application or utility that comes with the Component Information Portal. This application will help you import your data into the CIP database structure. Now, folks who work with CIP know that this database comes with 5,000 parts already developed and imported into the database. And we can see that when you open CIS Explorer. You can see the top level database, the structure of the database, and all the parts that exist within. But more importantly, how do you get your parts into this database structure? And so that is what CIP Importer will help you do. A little bit later in this demonstration, I'll tell you where you can get the CIP Importer and how to contact us if you need help with that. So let's open up CIP Importer. CIP Importer is a utility. It's going to help you get all of your data into the CIP database. And so what I'm going to do is run through basically a tutorial of showing you how to get this information in here. Now, when you get CIP Importer, which is free, by the way, there will be an accompanying tutorial and sample files that you can use to help you step through and understand the process of adding your parts to the database. So first of all, let's open up a sample file. This file that you're going to import needs to be in a CSV configuration or a CSV file. There's several fields that must occur in order to be able to append the database with your data. For example, the first one is the table field. CIP Importer has to know where in the database to put these files or these records. CIP needs to know where in the database to import these parts to. So that's why we must have the table, we must have a part number, and manufacturer part number. I'm not going to go through all of these fields. Suffice to say, I'm going to focus on just a few of these. Table, part number, manufacturer part number, description, and the value. There's quite a number of other fields in this particular sample file that we could also import this data into. What I'm going to do is more of an overview to show you how to use the CIP Importer. Notice that in this table I have two files, records 15 and 16, line items 15 and 16, that are not the same. They say cap, they do not say capacitor. So these are going to show up as an error, and we do that purposely to show you that we must have the correct mapping name for the table. So this would be the sample file that I'm going to use. Now the CIP Importer is going to step you through basic steps. Once you get this imported and installed, once you get the CIP Importer installed, you'll notice that it will step you through these basic steps that it needs in order to process the data and import the data into the database. So the first thing we're going to do is configure. When you configure, it wants to know what file you're going to use. So I'm going to browse to a file. And I would suggest when you're first learning how to work with the CIP Importer, use the tutorial that is provided. Use the sample files that are provided to give you an idea of the kinds of data that you want to import. And so the next, it'll step you through. You can choose a delimiter. We can also choose next. And so at this stage, it wants to make sure that it's going to be able to connect to the database. And this is important because we want the data to append into the database or fully import into the database. So I'm going to just test this. My connection is successful. And now we're going to begin the key field configuration mapping. So several fields we want to be able to map over. Now, the field name in your CSV file might be different than the field name that is going to be in the CIS database, and that's okay. You just need to know what field name you're going to map to which field in the database. So for the part number field, we're going to use part number. That happens to be the name of the field that's in my CSV file. The part category field is the table. It will determine where this part is going to reside. The manufacturer maps perfectly, so I don't have to change that. but you might have slightly different names. You might have, for example, MFG. You'll know how your field data is named by virtue of your data and how you've configured that. So you're really going to be mapping field name to field name, okay? And the next one is manufacturer part number, and of course I have manufacturer PN for that. So those are the fields I'm going to map right now. In this CSV file, I do not have a distributor name field, and I don't have a distributor part number field, although if I did, I could map those at this point. Now the component field mappings are going to be very similar to what we just did. So here's where you're going to have to go through and define whether or not, if you have a part type, you would have to select the part type and map it to that field. Now this is the import field. This is coming from your CSV file information. So it's going to use what data headers you have in here in order that you can map them to the corresponding ones inside of CIP. The other thing that's important to note here is this is applying to the first table, which is capacitors. So you're going to have to do this for every single table. And what I suggest when I work with customers one-on-one is have them do just one table at a time. So you might have 500 capacitors or different types of capacitors, and I would suggest just do the capacitors. Don't try to do the entire database at once when you're first working with CIP Importer. So this is very much similar to what I just did. You're going to go through and map. If I had a PCB footprint, for example, I could use that to map to the PCB footprint that's going to be in the CIP database. So now what I'm going to do is our sample file only has capacitors in it. So this would step me through all the rest of the table. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead here through the rest of the tables. And once I've gone past all of the tables, so if you had all the other table information in here, now I can see some other fields that I might want to map. These are the CIP fields. These are my import fields. If I had data in my file that I wanted to import to populate into these fields, I would be able to map that by clicking in here and using the drop down to find the corresponding field that I want to map that data to. Okay, so this is going to be the same sort of steps. I'm going to step through this. Once I'm done, I can go ahead and click to finish this. Now at this point, the rest of the buttons, Analyze, Add Only, or Import, have become enabled. So I've configured my file. The next thing I want to do, however, before I add or import is analyze the data. This is going to return a file for me. It's going to tell me all of the data that it looked at. And if I scroll down, I can get a summary of this data. The other thing I can see in this file is there are two warnings. Now, this is the warning for the data that I mentioned earlier, because the table name must be configured properly and it must map exactly to the name of the table. In our case, these two files will not be processed because they have incorrect table names. So that is one thing that you're going to have to be careful of. That's why we want to analyze our data. We want to analyze the data and see where the warnings exist so that we can go in there and correct them. So here's our summary. We have two warnings. There's 16 total parts that could be added to the database if I continue with this. And so I'm just going to minimize this. Now, there's two operators here, add only or import. If I want to just append to the existing data in my database, I would choose add only. So this would mean, for example, if I had a part number with PN0001, and that part already exists in the database, when I choose the add only, that part will not get overwritten. However, if I choose to import data, and I already have a part existing in my database with the part number PN0001, and there's also that part number in my CSV file that I'm importing, the existing data will get overwritten. So you must choose which which option you want to do. If you're just importing data for the first time, you could probably go with the import. All right, in my case, I'm going to say add only, and it's going to start and import. And once again, I'll get a report returned to tell me how much information it imported. So here are the parts that got added, 16 parts. Now, if I look in CIP, I can check what part numbers got added, and here are the part numbers that I just appended using the CIP importer. And of course, I can select any one of those, and I can view the data as it got imported. So this is a discussion on how to use the CIP importer. It does come with a tutorial, and I would encourage you to go through the tutorial. It's going to walk you through all of the steps that I just did to get familiar with it before you actually start importing your data. If while you are importing data you run into any problems or have any questions, please feel free to contact EMA Design Automation with any questions or issues. You can also send us email to techsupport@ema-eda.com, or you can call us at 585-334-6001, option 5.